I've lived in Japan, South Korea, and now I live in China.
Oh, wow. So, okay. And let's see, what age were you when you first left Michigan?
So I was 22 years old, I want to say. I just
Okay.
graduated university. It was about 3 days after I graduated, and I realized that the job market in the United States wasn't too good. So I was in that like post financial housing mess, and so I had some extra money, and I used that money to buy a plane ticket and start out teaching in Japan.
Okay, so you had this, what was your undergraduate degree?
I double majored in Japanese and English.
Okay. So it sounded like you might have had this idea in your head while you were still in school to teach abroad.
Yeah, kind of. Well, what happened was I was at a coffee shop in Kalamazoo, and it's called Fourth Coast. And so there's a guy who's a professor who taught Japanese history, and I wasn't sure what to do. And he said, well, if you're studying Japanese and your language skills aren't good enough, I would find any way possible to get back to Japan so you could improve your Japanese, so you could have a good professional career. So I thought about it, finished my coffee, he left, and I thought, okay, I've got to find that way. So I found my way and ended up, moving to Japan.
Could you say something in Japanese to me right now?
おはようございます。今は、Brian の podcast している。
I don't know if I want to know what that means.
It's just saying, hi, we're on Brian's podcast.
Oh,
So
okay,
pretty tame.
So yeah, that's different than how I came here. It was just sort of by chance. I was going to join the Peace Corps, and I was all set to go to Ethiopia, and I got cold feet sort of at the last second. And I had been to China when I was 17 with my high school. I lived with a host family in Beijing, and 12 years later, I was 29. Like I said, I had just kind of bailed out of the Peace Corps, and it was my plan B to just teach in China. I was like, I've been there before. Yeah, it was fun. I can do it. So the Google search brought up EF. A lot of teachers end up teaching at EF or start teaching at EF.
Yes.
It's so easy to get a job there. 10-minute
Sure.
phone conversation, and it didn't even feel real until I was on a plane to
Yeah,
China.
for sure.
So from Japan, how did you get to China?
So Japan, it was kind of the same sort of situation. Like it was another EF. A very large corporation was called Interact, and so I worked with them for a year and a half. After that, I ended up working for an Eikaiwa, which is like a training center, which tended to be a little bit better because you had a bit more freedom. You could dress the way you wanted to dress, and the hours weren't as good, but the freedom that you had was much better. From there, I ended up doing translation as an in-house translator, translating for a big tech company that had affiliates with Microsoft and Pfizer and Astellas and like other sorts of companies. That company was kind of in bad financial straits, and I kind of wanted to see more of the world. So then Korea, and then after Korea, I wanted to teach at a university in South Korea, which eventually led me to China to get 2 years of university teaching experience.
Okay.
Yeah.
So so you taught at university. Maybe we can quickly talk about just the different types of teaching jobs you can get in China. So the one I got, EF, is a training center. You work typically Wednesday to Sunday. Wednesday to Friday, it's 2 to 8 or 9 p.m., and then all day Saturday and Sunday. So not
Okay.
the best hours, and I guess you could say they work you pretty hard compared to other styles that we'll talk about. And off the bat, I would just say training centers are probably not what you want coming. Even though it's the easiest to get, there's, I would say, easier jobs or more fulfilling jobs than the training centers, because those are, of course, like private companies, and they're pushing their own marketing spiel, and you kind of get sucked into being more of a white monkey, you call it, I guess, at the training centers. A lot more sort of you're selling English to the parents. It's a product to be sold as opposed to actually teaching a more traditional style. But how was university?
Okay, well, first thing, before I moved to university,
Yeah.
I kind of want to talk about that. I kind of feel that what you're saying is kind of the truth of like all levels of teaching in English.
Sure.
University, training center, they're all sort of for profit. It is an industry after all, so they do have to make some sort of money, whether it is students enrolling at a university or students enrolling within a classroom. These are both important aspects to think about when you're going into the teaching market. It is a business at the end of the day, and companies need to make money. That being said, yes, there are crap training centers that will drive you into the ground, but I've also had experiences with training centers where we've had light hours, where you only have like 3 or 4 classes a day, you finish your classes, you go home, and life is pretty good. That being said, if you're working for a big corporation like EF, I think that's a big risk, because you're probably going to get driven into the ground, because they are a big corporation, and bottom line is incredibly important for their success. If you go to like a mom and pop shop, I would say they have a bit more wiggle room, because you can directly talk to the manager, the boss, and have like a real relationship where you can actually compromise in some situations. Not all, because some of these small mom and pop shops might even be worse, which I would go down to find a good job. If it's a training center, I would say it's the same like a university. You kind of have to ask around, and maybe like ask people who work at the school, or check like with Facebook groups to get an idea. Sure. Because from what I can tell with you, you would not recommend EF at all?
Not really, no. I've always had an issue with just kind of drinking the punch kind of deal. Like, and they really want you to drink the punch there. They want you to be just full gung-ho, sell the product, and they have all these weird mascots, and they want you to sing and dance and always be happy and smile, and they expect you to sort of be a mascot as well. And so, you know, and that's not really my style. There's a lot of, for example, they make you do a lot of marketing events, so you go out into the community, which can be kind of fun, but your job is just to make English seem amazing and to get these parents to pay the money to go to the class, which I guess for some people is fine, but I would prefer to just get down to business and do my job instead of try to like put on this face all the time.
But I think what you're saying is there's a lot of strings attached, like with any sort of teaching job, that they're not going to tell you about. Like you have a contract, and then that contract is generally like a vague idea of this sort of teaching you're going to get into, and then there's all of the surprises and stuff like you just talked about. So for example, like when I was working at a university, you might have to do like international festivals or sports day, and you'll have to like dress up. And for me, for example, somewhere in the Chinese internet, I have pom-poms and I am dancing in front of a group of like 3,000 people, like cheering like a fucking retard, because that's exactly what I was told to do, and I was obliged to do it. I was new in starting this job, and this isn't a training center. For people who are out there listening, this is a legitimate, maybe a legitimate university. I won't say names, but you're starting to, if you haven't gathered from Brian and I, what we're saying is, it's interesting, right? There's a lot of, the word monkey gets tossed around a lot.
And then the other part, I guess a big reason why I wouldn't recommend going the training center route is the hours. Working at 2 p.m. every day, it kind of just, your days kind of just go away. Unless you're super motivated to get up early and make something in the first half of your day, it's weird working 2 to 9 p.m. Then your Saturdays are taken up. So you kind of exist in this bubble of only training center people, because it's not a typical 9 to 5, and the people at primary schools or whatever other expats are working, they're working a normal schedule, so you're kind of separated from the expat community.
You're like in a training center bubble, but I think it can be okay. I think it can be okay if you're not a morning person. For me, when I was working in South Korea, the Hagwon I was working for, I think started at 4 o'clock, and I thought that was perfect, because then I could sleep until noon, and then I like get up, like go have some coffee, and life was pretty great.
And the money is, to be honest, just awful right off the bat at EF. They pay you a certain amount. They make you pay for your apartment out of your paycheck. And you know, they hook you up with a real estate agent right away who is clearly interested in making a buck for themselves too. So you're making far less than you would at a primary school or at a kindergarten, which in the kindergarten is much easier work, I'd say. So they're kind of pulling the wool over your eyes right at the beginning. You don't know any better, so you're like, this is great. And then you start talking to people that work at kindergartens and primary schools. You're like, wait, you get paid how much? And your apartment's free? Like, what am I doing? The other part of it, I think that's important, is that you can move up in a company like EF. If you're willing to drink the punch and play the game, then you can move up, and that's great if you want to get promoted within the company. Whereas as a kindergarten teacher, primary school teacher and university teacher, maybe you can improve your salary, but there's really nowhere to go. Upward mobility.
Now, I don't know if you mind me asking this question, but
No, go ahead.
How much were you making when you first came here?
So EF, it was 12,000 something UN per month, and then with the apartment it was 2,400 UN. So I was taking home 10 or less.
Okay, so about $1,300.
Yeah, whatever it equates to. Yeah, which is, I'm sure you would agree, less than.
Yeah, that's pretty shitty.
Yeah, it's pretty bad.
Yeah.
It's pretty bad.
But I think the good thing with the EF is that as crappy as the money is, and you can make a lot of money elsewhere, it's pretty brain dead, I'm going to be honest, because it seems to have everything prepared for you. You don't have to do any sort of extra work. You can just walk in and you don't think about your job, and you're in, out, and on with life. And if you want to go like full... Can I say the word retard on your podcast?
Absolutely.
Okay, full retard on the if you want to go full retard and just like do that for 5 years. I've seen some people still do that. Like my wife knows like people that work at EF. I mean, they don't recognize her because they're like, once again, like zombie full retard mode. We're like, but like they seem to like it, I guess. I don't know, or at least they don't.
No,
know
I know people like that have
yeah.
signed another year, then another year.
And another year.
It is easy, and I will say for their credit, they ease you in big time. From the moment I landed in Guangzhou, there's training seminars. Then I observed classes for about 3 weeks before I even. Then I half teach a class with someone watching me before I finally get my own class. And so they ease you in, as opposed to a primary school, you're just thrown right into the fire, and they give you like bare bones to work with, and you're expected to just go. And that can be pretty intimidating if you have no former teaching experience.
Sure. Well, I think it's also intimidating because the training that you're usually given in China is either non-existent, or it's kind of like the blind following the blind. Like, who the hell are you watching? Who's so qualified about the same guy who's pretty much in the same situation as you, only he's been here like a year or two longer, right? It's not really... Like, a lot of the teachers here, I would just say, are unqualified. So it just kind of puts a bad situation if you're switching into primary school or middle school, because then you're actually confronted with the fact that, oh, fuck, what did I actually learn from these sort of jobs? And the answer is very little.
Well, yeah, like you were talking about earlier, how the just the style of teaching at EF is so different. You're in a small room. There's only 5 to 10 kids.
Sure.
And you got the nice interactive whiteboard, and it's all laid out for you. You're just playing games, more or less. You don't really have to play anything yourself, as opposed to a more traditional classroom, 40 plus kids, a chalkboard, and a projector that may or may not work.
Sure.
It's a lot more work, I think.
Well, I think the potential for like a training center to actually teach a real class is there, because it's a lot smaller.
Right.
So you can actually authentically communicate with your students and try to have like a real conversation. It might be slow and stilted, and you'll have to repeat yourself many times over, but it's there. I find when I do these larger classrooms, like 40 or 50, it's just more of a show. You can give like some English and they can maybe understand what you're saying, but there isn't like an authentic conversation.
It's the chanting back and forth.
You can
There's
do
a lot
the
of
chanting.
drilling, a lot of drilling in those classes where it's just you say it, they say it.
Yeah,
and,
but that's not like a good way to learn languages. No. That's the big problem that I have.
Yeah, your way, and you tried this with me once,
that's right,
where you just talked Japanese to me for an entire board game.
Yeah, that's right.
I think I picked up a couple words, but
right. Because, well, that's like the comprehensible input and like the naturalist method with like Noam Chomsky. That's what should be used to be teaching, but it would require like a good year of training, like actual training for teachers to understand the theory, the methodology, and then you'd also need like coaches. It's an expensive investment for a teacher who's probably going to leave them after like a couple of years. So I think a lot of schools don't want to put that money down for the investment, and they hope that you have already acquired those skills by having like 2 years of teaching. But if you've never actually learned a language and you don't know what works and what's frustrating and what is enjoyable and what is effective, or you don't like read up on it or stuff like that, then you're bound to just repeat the same mistakes again and again. Once again, it goes back to the blind following the blind.
So from the perspective of someone in America or whatever country thinking of coming to China to teach, can we quickly describe the different avenues that you can find either a training center, university, primary, or kindergarten? I found that with my going in completely blind, all I could find was training center gigs online. That's why I took EF. If someone wanted a university or kindergarten or primary, what would you suggest?
If
that
you want,
they do?
you could go to Dave's ESL Cafe. That's okay.
They can be good, yeah.
Yeah, they can be good. Facebook groups, stuff like that. I mean, look online and know that there's other options out there.
You need a recruiter, I find. It's all done through recruiters mostly.
Yeah, it's true. A lot of recruiters will get you jobs.
And
stuff
even
like that.
once you're here and you get WeChat, everything is done through WeChat. So it might even be beneficial to download WeChat in America and somehow get your way into WeChat groups, because once you do that, you're good.
Yeah, I would say. Well, yeah, and no. I mean, I think that the thing with the WeChat groups is it's a little more dangerous because you get a lot more sketchy sort of people offering illegitimate jobs. So one of the big things in China is there's a lot of people that might be trying to find teachers, and they need teachers pretty badly these days. So they make a promise to finding you a job with like a visa, and I don't know, it's could be
sketchy.
It's pretty sketchy.
That's why EF is good. You can guarantee they're going to do it right.
Yeah, they're going to do it right, and they're not going to fuck you over, so it's a pretty safe bet.
There's plenty of stories of people coming here and working on
tourist visas
or
like
whatever,
stuff
and
like
that's
that.
that's rolling the dice, especially now.
I think so. Well, I think, and that's the thing where it's like you kind of have to know people and ask around, because some agents will even do that, where they'll promise like, hey, I can get you a tourist visa, you can work for this school, but then in reality they say, come on a tourist visa, we can switch you to a work visa, which is illegal, and they can't really do it. And you're put in this rigmarole where you have to essentially run from wherever your job is to out of the country and then back in every 3 months. And it starts to become suspicious, and the government does notice, and they're cracking down more and more on that sort of behavior.
So if we could real quick talk about your experience teaching in Korea and Japan versus China, which one did you like the best? It's just lifestyle-wise, culture-wise, maybe food-wise, whatever.
Sure. I mean,
you could rank them, maybe.
I mean, for me, it's like, it really depends. The way I would look at it is, what do you actually find interesting about the country you're going to that you want to teach? And if you have a high interest in the local culture, whether it's dramas or songs or whatever, then you're going to have a much more enjoyable time than you would at a place where you're like, fuck this place, I don't want to fucking work here, everybody fucking sucks. You're going to just be like, one of my friends who was actually in the Peace Corps, who had a like crazy time and got really wasted and told her fucking like director off and just went fucking ham, right? I mean, that's going to essentially be you if you have no interest in the culture. So what I say is, through these experiences, I've learned that they all have something that you can appreciate, and you have to find that sort of thing to appreciate for you to have a good time. Like for me, I think in Japan, it was more like all of this weird leftover crap from like the bubble economy. If you guys don't know, Japan's bubble economy like existed until the 90s, and then it just crapped itself. So you get all this really weird leftover technology like laser discs and like all this other like crap.
It's kind of cool though.
It is cool.
Like
it's very cool. Yeah. If
you
you like this vintage weird like stuff and like to go thrifting, Japan's amazing for that. If you live in the countryside, like Tokyo's been cleaned out, but the countryside, last I checked, still amazing. And so that's what I found to really enjoy myself while being there. It took a while, but it found it. With Korea, it was like PC bongs and playing computer games, since it's such a integral part of the culture. Like we can watch StarCraft on TV or League of Legends on TV, and just there's a lot of interesting games, and I do like playing games. And then reading wise, Korean's much easier to read, and so it's easier to pick up for me at least. And just like it allows you to become very easy to jump into other aspects of culture, whether it's traditional culture or like modern culture such as webtoons, because everything is very easily read. Because Korean, although it looks intimidating, it only really has 24 characters. With China, with China, I think it's the amazement of like, what the hell is actually going on here? Like it changes so quickly, and you're living in an authoritarian government where whatever they say goes, and it changes like that. And because of that, I find that interesting, because you can just watch the change happen. So it's just kind of like being on the outside looking in.
It's just hard to it's really hard to pick up the language. So I mean, don't expect to be able to be speaking Chinese in the first 6 months or 6 years if you don't actually make a concerted effort.
Yeah, but that's like anything, right? You're not going to get good by like looking at a
Spanish,
piano. You got to fucking...
I think you could, if you took Spanish, like did you take Spanish in middle school and high school in the U.S.?
Yeah, sure, like 2 years.
I feel like you could drop us in Mexico City and within 6 months we'd be fluent in Spanish.
I think we'd have a better chance because there's a lot of cognates and stuff like that, but there's still like the grammar, and then if the people are using Spanish that's way above our level, we're never going to pick it up.
But you can still, you have an ear for it. You can, I feel like through osmosis you start to pick it up, but with Chinese you could listen to it for decades, and I don't think I would get any better at it unless I'm, like I said, studying, get a tutor, practicing. So it's...
Yeah, I would just say you need like...
It's hard to assimilate,
I would say
into Chinese culture.
I think... Well, sure, there's that. There's a lot of differences in values between like Western culture and Eastern culture.
Right.
And that plays a part in terms of language and how you should actually communicate yourself.
Right, absolutely.
Because if you're communicating yourself in like this individualistic sort of way that exists in Western culture, you can kind of come off as arrogant and kind of a dick.
Right, I agree.
My wife says that a lot. Right, baby?
Yeah.
Anyway.
And not like this is the only reason to come to China, but the reason why a lot of expats come here is you're going to make more money here and then maybe a little less in Korea, a little less in Japan, but you'll make the most money as an ESL teacher in China.
Sure, right now.
And so that's a reason to come here. But there are times when you feel like totally like an alien here, and it doesn't get necessarily any better with time. But if you can appreciate it and be strong-minded, I think it's okay.
I think you can read books on like the culture to understand it.
Yeah.
I mean, you're always going to be treated as an outsider like wherever you go. I mean, you can see that in America, right? Like you see like someone who's like Spanish or whatever, like from Mexico, and there's a difference in terms of the culture and how they carry themselves, how they go about their daily lives. And I think that's very cool and interesting because that's what the world is actually made of on a larger scale. With China, I mean, obviously it's magnified because we're like two honkies like walking down the street, so we stick out pretty badly.
And where we live in Shunda too, it's pretty, I mean, you could call it somewhat rural, and there's still little kids that just point at you and say, "Why go right? Why go right?"
So I mean, it happened to me today, right? Yeah, there's like a whole string of like middle schoolers. They're like, "Why Jow? Why Jow? Why Jow? Why Jow?"
Yeah, or taking selfies with you. So you're still pretty. You're not common here, and if you had any tips for just an average person moving here, I feel like a lot of people get scared away and just leave the job, go back to America, whatever. So what would your tips be to someone who is coming here and they're feeling, they land and they feel scared and they feel like, it's too intimidating, I don't want to do this?
I think if they're that scared, I don't know, like I think they're gonna bottom out. If you bottom out, you realize you can only go up from where you're at. Yeah. Right. And then.
It's different. I think there's a good expat community. If you just lean on them, find a few expats to hang out with is something that always helped me.
I think it helps, but I think it also like harms because then you don't actually get to assimilate within the culture, right? You just kind of get like these outsiders living on the outside. Find something that local people you can actually do with other Chinese people. I think that's a good start. Like I said, something that you're interested in the culture. Learning the language. I mean, if you look at something like Steve Kaufman who's
that?
Steve Kaufman is a linguist who knows like 17 different languages, so he's got a lot of advice on like how to acquire languages. He does a naturalist method like what I suggest, how you picked up some Japanese by just me speaking it to you on a level that's much more understandable. Like something like that where you find someone, not a teacher, not a language teacher, but a language practice partner. So that way you're not studying the language, but you're speaking and acquiring the language.
And as long as you're getting out there too, like I love to bike. We make enough money here where you can pretty much indulge whatever hobby you have. Yeah, and some people play games and they stay shut in their apartment. Or I mean, not a lot of people do that, but like for me, I get on the bicycle and I just take these long rides out into the countryside. And whether I can speak to the people I come across or not, it still feels like I'm making some sort of effort in seeing.
You're seeing
kind
something
of local
more
culture.
I think getting out of the expat bubble is what I'd recommend. Yeah. Because then you're actually experiencing something new. Because for me, the expat bubble gets really cliquey and
it's really comforting though. It can be comforting, I would say, like a safety net. It's a safety net.
I don't know. I mean, for me, I lived in Japan and Korea and now China, and the expat communities are kind of all the same. It's kind of like, okay, we're gonna bash on China, but not with like facts, but just like how they're feeling for the day, right? Like if there's like a facts, like you present some sort of facts and have like a an argument based in reality, not based on because you had a bad class like 2 hours before, then I think you have like some points. But at the same time, you kind of have to accept that that's the way the culture is and do something about it, which you could either accept that's how it is and make, how do I say it? Like make an agreement with yourself and then the reality that surrounds you. So you're not so fucking pissed about living there, but are content at least. You don't have to fall in love with whatever place you go because you shouldn't change yourself and like drink the Kool-Aid, if you will, in like a cultural aspect where you're like, my country fucking sucks and has nothing good. But you know, it gives you, but at least appreciate what's there, what it does have for good, what it does have for bad. And then it also allows you to look at your own country in the same way. It's like, okay, what is actually good about my country? And what's actually bad about it? And it kind of puts you more in the center of like how the world works. And,
all right, to wrap it up, if you had to rank, let's see, Japan, Korea, China, where would you teach as a first-time teacher or someone moving from America? And would you go for university, training center, primary, kindergarten as your first job?
I mean, that's a tough question because like the access to university jobs and stuff like that in Japan and Korea are much more competitive. In Korea, and so you can't just like walk into a university job.
So yeah, we'll say first-time teachers.
First-time teachers, like I said, follow whatever country you're actually interested in. If you're interested in Japan and you're in China, what the fuck are you doing, right? It's like, hey, I want a cat, but I bought a dog. That's like what, right? It doesn't make any sense. But choose the country you're actually legitimately interested in because that's what's most important. Is what's important to you. But make sure you have like a legitimate reason for going there. Something that is based in reality, not how you perceive it. So if you like Chinese dramas or Chinese music, that is something based in reality. Not like, oh, this is going to be a wonderful experience sort of thing, right? And when you have no idea what the fuck you're going to get yourself into. Yeah,
and I think you're right. I think that's the most important thing because even if you do, I wouldn't be scared away by a training center because if you can hack it for 1 year, then once you're here, there's so many more opportunities that you realize are there. So don't get so caught up on, oh, it's a training center and it's going to be terrible. If you can just do 1 year, it's fine for a year.
Sure. You know? I mean, that's the first with any job because you'll be switching careers if it's your first time teaching. So it's going to be a big turn. And so there's a lot of things you'll have to learn, like classroom management, like lesson preparation, like trying to give some sort of comprehensible input into your students and trying to actually make sure the games that you're playing relate to the language you're trying to teach, right? Because the idea is if you're teaching like a particular grammatical form, like present continuous or something like that, you want to try to flood them with it so that way something eventually sticks, right? You're essentially throwing the same dart at the board hoping that it'll stick.
If you had to choose though, China, Korea, Japan.
I can't do that. I just gave the answer for that part, right? Because it's not up to me, it's up to the person. So my answer doesn't matter. What I would recommend personally is, once again, like the age group you're most interested in. I think colleges are the most relaxing in terms of the amount of hours and freedom that you'll have. That's good, right? If you want that sort of freedom. But adults and like college students are probably the most critical in terms of mistakes. Because like when you're teaching to kids, you can bullshit a lesson and wing it, and the little kids aren't going to like really know the difference, right? They're going to be like, oh, Brian Lauscher is just a little funny today, when Brian and Tyler Lauscher might be like really hungover or something like that. And we're just like, okay, what the fuck? Just get this shit done, right?
So go with your gut then, whatever you're most interested in. Whatever country you're most interested in.
Of course. And then the same with the age group as well. But then just understand the caveats. Like with adults, you'll have more freedom, but there'll be more. They can tell if you're winging it, and they'll be a bit more pissed. And not as much as you can have like a deeper conversation, you can also be criticized a lot more heavily because they can express themselves.
And as you're planning to head back to America somewhat soon, right? All right. So as you're on your way back, what are some things that you'll miss about China? Just to end it here.
I don't know, because I haven't left, right? I mean, the prices will probably be something I'll miss, like everything being dirt cheap and just whatever. Like that's pretty neat. Like all the pirated shit's fun because it's like, hey, I can get like a board game or whatever for like $5.
Yeah, we've had
like
some fun playing board games.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like, and see, that's the stuff you have to find because that'll make you enjoy your experience while you're here.
Right.
And whatever it is, you find it, have it, love it, do it, be it.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you, Tyler.
Yeah, thank you, Brian.
Yeah.
Have a good one.
Cheers. You too.